Thank you. The following is one of my voiceover demos. If you're a voiceover artist and you would like to advertise one of your demos on my podcast, please send an MP3 to thedrill12, all one word, at gmail.com. That's thedrill12 at gmail.com. Back in a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Caesar's Palace for 12 rounds of boxing. In the red corner, from Los Angeles, California, wearing the red trunks with the gold trim, weighing in at 125 pounds, the lightweight champion of the world, Danny Little Red Lopez. Well, Bill, our winners get a home theater receiver. That's right. Experience the full potential of high-definition video with this 72-channel digital home theater receiver from Yamaha. But wait, that's not all. They also get a 5.1-channel surround sound system from Mirage. With 5 palm-sized speakers and a compact subwoofer cube, the MX 5.1 brings you huge immersive sound with Mirage's omnipolar technology. All from the Spiegel catalog, Chicago, Illinois, 60609. And they're taking closer order as down the stretch they come. Mr. Hot Stuff has 3 lengths to make up with chocolate candy last. On the rail, take the points behind that gallant son with chocolate candy gaining on the outside. In the lead is Pioneer of the Nile being tackled by chocolate candy. They're neck and neck as they come to the wire. And Pioneer of the Nile holds off chocolate candy and wins the Santa Anita Derby. And now, on your feet, time to greet holder of 14 NBA titles, your home team, your Los Angeles Lakers. Number 3 at 6'8", 5th year out of UCLA, playing forward, Trevor Ariza. Starting at center, number 17 at 7 feet, 4th year out of St. Andrews High School, Andrew Bynum. And at guard, number 24, 6'6", 13th season out of Loyal Marion High School, Kobe Bryant.
America treats black people the way cashiers treat pennies. Legally, they have to accept us everywhere. But if you walk in with more than 4 or 5, everybody's like, what the fuck is this bullshit?
Good morning. It's Wednesday, Management Wednesday, July the 31st, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer, the patriotic song of the day, and the headlines, we will have patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, the 33 strategies of war, and management of the absurd. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Come on, boys. Fall in. Raise the colors. High files right. Prepare to march. We're proud soldiers from back home now. We're from the hills, the plains, and the valleys. And under the flag of our country we shall rally. So keep the beat, boys. March along, proud and strong. March into battle with a song. Let's hear it, boys. March, march along. 1, 2, 1. The army is gathering from here and from far. The trumpet is sounding the call for the war. Abe Lincoln's our leader, he's gallant and strong. With good armor and we're marching along. Marching along, we are marching along. Gird on the armor and we're marching along. Abe Lincoln's our leader, he's gallant and strong. For God and for country we are marching along. The foe is before us in battle array, but let us not waver or turn from the way. The Lord is our strength and the Union's our song. With courage and faith we are marching along. Marching along, we are marching along. Gird on the armor and we marching along. Abe Lincoln's our leader, he's gallant and strong. With God and our country we are marching along. Our wives and our children we leave in your care. We feel you will help them with sorrow to bear. 'Tis hard thus to part, but we hope won't be long. We'll keep up our heart as we're marching along. Marching along, we are marching along. Gird on the armor and we're marching along. Abe Lincoln's our leader, he's gallant and strong. For God and our country we are marching along. We sigh for our country, we mourn for our dead. For them now our last drop of blood we will shed. Our cause is the right one, our foes in the wrong. Let's gladly we'll sing as we're marching along. Marching along, we are marching along. Gird on the armor and we're marching along. Abe Lincoln's our leader, he's gallant and strong. For God and our country we are marching along. Marching along, we are marching along. Gird on the armor and we're marching along. Abe Lincoln's our leader, he's gallant and strong. For God and our country we are marching along. Marching along, we are marching along. Gird on the armor and be marching along. Abe Lincoln's our leader, he's gallant and strong. For God and our country we are marching along. For God and our country we are marching along.
Thank you. And now, the tourist with the headlines.
Crowley and Tricia McLaughlin, Barney and Company picks it up right now. Stu, take it away.
All right. Good morning, Maria, and good morning, everyone. The political leader of Hamas assassinated while visiting Iran. A missile took him out at a guest house in Tehran. He was believed to have planned the October 7th attack on Israel. A military commander for Hezbollah has been assassinated in Beirut, Lebanon. He was believed to have planned last week's rocket attack that killed 12 children. Hamas and Hezbollah are proxies of Iran, which threatens a harsh and painful response. This is escalation, the Mideast on the brink of a wider war. There is some market response to this. Start with the price of oil. It's rising. It's up over $2 to $77 a barrel. That would be, that's 3% up this morning. And gold, that's close to a record territory, $2,465 per ounce. The stock market's rallying, but this has nothing to do with Israel and Hezbollah and Hamas. Stocks are rallying. The Fed announces its rate policy today. A rate cut not expected today today, but a cut in September may be hinted at. You're going to have to read between Jay Powell's lines when he speaks this afternoon. The Dow up maybe 88, S&P up 69, but look at the NASDAQ, a 400-point gain pre-market. That's the chip makers rallying big time today. But you've really got to take a look at Microsoft. In its financial report late yesterday, its cloud business disappointed, and the stock plunged. Pre-market today, it's down about, let's see now, it's down just 1.7%. Something of a comeback this morning. And by the way, tonight, Meta reports, fingers crossed there, after Microsoft problem yesterday. Bitcoin, still around $66,000 a share. $66,000 a coin. Interest rates, let's see now. We have the 10-year yield coming down to 4.10%. And the 2-year, we've got that now at, 4.34%. Politics. Another flip-flop from Kamala Harris. She claims she took action on the border when she was California's Attorney General. She is ignoring her record on the border as Vice President. She has also flip-flopped on fracking, private medical insurance, and mandatory gun buybacks. Donald Trump, in a Truth Social post, attacked Harris on foreign policy. No wars were started on his watch. What a different world it would be under Trump, he says. Today, he campaigns in Pennsylvania. Pollster Nate Silver says, if the election were held today, Trump would win the Electoral College by a wide margin. Harris takes the popular vote by a very small margin. On the show today, real estate. Sales of million-dollar homes, that's the only segment of the market that is expanding. What does that tell you about real estate? It's Wednesday, July 31st, 2024. August is tomorrow. Varney and Company, about to begin.
And that was the headlines. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Stuart Varney's My Take.
The top Hamas political leader, Ismail Haniyeh, has been assassinated. He was in Tehran visiting his patrons for the inauguration of Iran's new president. He was staying in a guest house which was hit by a missile. Hours before, he had met with Iran's supreme leader, been right next to him. The strike showed the vulnerability of terror leaders and the ability to take them out no matter where they are. Separately, a top Hezbollah commander was also killed. This was in a strike near Beirut, Lebanon. He planned the rocket attack on Israel that killed 12 children. So we have 2 strikes on 2 organizations, both of which are clients of Iran. Iran says their response will be painful and harsh. Hezbollah, according to retired 4-star General Jack Keane, has over 100,000 rockets in Lebanon poised for a mass attack on Israel. Iran itself runs a terror network with tentacles reaching right into the United States. There's clear escalation of real conflict in the Mideast. How will President Biden respond? His party is split wide open on Israel. There is a significant pro-Hamas bloc among House Democrats, and it's led by Rashida Tlaib, who represents Michigan. That is a must-win state in the election. It's hard to see Biden delivering full military and diplomatic support for Israel in this situation. And Vice President Harris, where does she stand? Meeting Prime Minister Netanyahu last week, she called for a ceasefire deal in Gaza. Any chance of that went out the window with these assassinations. Harris will not be pleased, but she is now leading the Democrats into the election. This is her first foreign policy test. One last point. There will be many people who conclude that none of this would be happening if Donald Trump was still president. He's the president who crippled Iran. It was Biden and Harris who let them recover. Second hour of Varney just getting started.
So again, what the Democrats need to do, what they should do is dump Biden, 25th Amendment, whatever, get him to resign and get rid of him, because you can't have 2 leaders. And that's what we're facing here. What is Biden going to do? What is Kamala Harris going to do? You can't have 2 leaders, and especially in a foreign policy situation. So the thing that they should do, since they're not going to back Biden for re-election, dump him entirely and let Kamala Harris be the president of the United States. She would then be the incumbent and would have all the advantages there too. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, the military shorts.
He's considered by many to be among the greatest outfielders in Major League Baseball history. He finished his career with exactly 3,000 hits, won 2 World Series, 12 Gold Gloves, 4 batting titles, and a league MVP. His name was Roberto Clemente, and during the prime of his career, he enlisted in the United States Marine Corps as a reserve infantryman in the 3rd Recruit Battalion, where he would spend his off-season serving on active duty. Clemente considered his humanitarian work and time with the Marine Corps more rewarding than his accomplishments on the diamond. He took nothing for granted, saying, "God tells you how long you're going to be here, so you never know what can happen tomorrow." Tragically, Roberto Clemente died in a plane crash while delivering aid to earthquake-ravaged Nicaragua on New Year's Eve 1972 at the age of 38. He was immediately voted into the Baseball Hall of Fame, and MLB established the Roberto Clemente Award for sportsmanship and community involvement.
What's the real reason the A10 Warthog has a shark painted on its nose? Let me explain. The shark nose-mouth design has been used for decades, but it only got famous during World War II, when the Flying Tigers painted shark mouths on their P-40 Warhawk fighters. Over the years, the tradition of painting shark mouths on aircraft continued, but why did they specifically choose the shark for the A10? If the famous Burt sound hasn't already scared the enemy, the shark nose art is meant to intimidate them. The aggressive look can have a psychological impact on enemies, making the A10 Warthog seem even more scary. But it's not just about scaring the enemy. The shark mouth design boosts morale and builds a sense of unity among the crew. However, not every Warthog has a shark mouth painted on it. The classic shark mouth is especially associated with the 74th, 75th, and 76th Fighter Squadrons. These units were originally part of the Flying Tigers, so they use the design to honor their history and heritage.
Why does the devil like fear? Why does he try to make you afraid? Why does he try to make all of us afraid?
It wasn't until Ashley had dealt with him in a case that was somewhat protracted that I discovered that he, as a demon of fear, is because he himself lives in constant fear. And the reason being is because God sets him up to take a shellacking. And so a lot of times, he even said God sets him up to get humiliated. So he has to do this. He says he's exhausted all the time because he's in this constant hypervigilance of trying to keep track of everything that's going on and watching his flank, but he can't watch everything. And so he never knows when he's going to get broadsided. So God punishing him. And so he literally lives in constant fear. So he just wants to replicate his own psychology in us.
The far left, which always like to use, well, Europe does it. Yeah, no, that doesn't work on this one anymore. Or on immigration. Sweden opened its borders to over 1.5 million immigrants since 2010, and now 20% of its citizens are foreign-born, and its education system is tanking, and it has Europe's highest rate of gangland killings. And one result is that the far-right parties are in the government now there for the first time. To which liberals say blaming immigrants for the rising crime rate is racist. Yeah, but is it true? Of course it's true. It's not a coincidence the quality of life went down after the Somali gangs started a drug turf war using hand grenades. Calling it racist doesn't solve the problem. It hands future elections to someone who will solve the problem and who, I promise, you're not going to like.
What did an American veteran recall about the German soldiers? At first, the German soldiers seemed like ordinary people, mostly 16, 18 years old. We socialized, shared cigarettes. One day, the commander saw our fraternization. He hit me on the back of the head so that my helmet came off and said, "Remember, this is the enemy. Who do you give your cigarettes to?" He pointed at an SS soldier and added, "If you see one, kill him. He's not a human being." At that time, I didn't understand what the SS were doing. We thought they were just elite troops like our Marines. By winter, the realization came. In every liberated village, we saw Frenchmen, women, children, hanged with signs saying they helped the partisans. It was a horrifying sight. In political classes, we were told about atrocities in Poland and the USSR, but we didn't pay much attention to it. If we had known the truth about the SS, we would have killed many more Germans. By the end of the war, we stopped taking SS soldiers prisoner.
And that was the military shorts. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, a little bit of motivation.
In the shadows of your journey, you've fought battles that no one else can see. Every scar, a testament to your resilience, every setback, a whisper of your unyielding spirit. The darkness has tried to swallow you, yet here you stand, a beacon of tenacity in a world that seeks to break you. Remember the nights drenched in despair, the moments when surrender seemed like a sweet release. Recall the ghosts of doubt that haunted your every step, and the chains of fear that bound your soul. Yet, against all odds, you've clawed your way through the abyss, each victory a shard of light piercing the void. You've come too far to quit now. Abandonment now would mean all those battles fought in vain, every drop of blood, sweat, and tear rendered meaningless. The darkness will always lurk, waiting to reclaim you, but you are forged in the fires of perseverance. Your journey is etched with pain, but also with the promise of triumph. Let the world tremble at your resolve. Let your enemies know that you are relentless, unbreakable. Quitting is not an option, for you are a warrior of the night, and you have conquered too much to be undone by the shadows. Rise and let your scars sing songs of your indomitable spirit. You are a force of nature, and you will not falter now. Embrace the darkness, for it has made you who you are, and march forward with the fury of 1,000 storms. You are unstoppable, and your destiny awaits. The road ahead is still paved with uncertainty, each step a gamble with fate. Yet within you burns a fire that the darkness cannot extinguish. You've survived the tempests, endured the relentless onslaughts, and emerged from the ruins, time and time again. The echoes of your struggle are not in vain. They are the symphony of your survival. As you stand on the precipice of your next challenge, feel the weight of your journey anchor you. Every hardship has been a chisel, carving you into a monument of resilience. The pain that once sought to break you has instead become your armor, each scar a mark of your indomitable will. Let the darkness know that it holds no dominion over you. You've stared into the void and seen the reflection of your own strength staring back. The demons that once whispered defeat now cower before your resolve. You are not just a survivor. You are a conqueror of the shadows. In this moment of reckoning, summon the fury that has driven you this far. Let your heart thunder with the rage of every challenge overcome, every fear vanquished. You are the storm that the night feared would come, an unstoppable force that refuses to be tamed. Quitting now would betray everything you've endured, every victory hard won. The darkness seeks to reclaim you, to pull you back into its cold embrace. But you have become its master. Each step forward is a declaration of defiance, a testament to your unwavering spirit. Rise once more, warrior of the night. Let the world see that you are not merely surviving, but thriving amidst the chaos. Your journey is far from over, and your story is still being written. Embrace the darkness, for it has shaped you, but know that it will never own you. You are a beacon in the night, a relentless force of nature. Press on, for the dawn is near, and your destiny is within reach. You are unstoppable, and you will not quit now. Feel the power that courses through your veins, a testament to every battle fought and every wound healed. The darkness may loom, but it has not and will not consume you. You are a warrior, forged in the crucible of adversity, and your strength is a force the shadows cannot fathom. The path ahead is treacherous, littered with the remnants of those who surrendered. But you are different. You are the one who rises when others fall, who pushes forward when others retreat. Each challenge is a call to arms, a chance to prove that your spirit cannot be broken. In the silence of the night, when the world is asleep, your resolve awakens. It is in these moments of solitude that your true strength is revealed. You have faced the abyss and found your way back, guided by the unyielding light of your determination. Quitting would mean betraying the warrior within, the one who has faced insurmountable odds and emerged victorious. The journey has been long, the battles fierce, but every step has brought you closer to your destiny. You are not here by chance. You are here because you fought for it, bled for it, and refused to let the darkness win. Let your heart beat with the fury of 1,000 storms, a reminder that you are alive, that you are here, and that you are unstoppable. The night may be long, but the dawn is inevitable, and you are the harbinger of that new day. Every breath you take is a testament to your resilience, every step a defiance of the shadows that seek to claim you. Rise, warrior, and let your spirit roar with the power of all you have overcome. The darkness has shaped you, but it does not define you. You are the master of your fate, the captain of your soul. Your journey is a testament to the power of the human spirit, a beacon for all who wander in the dark. You are a force of nature, an unstoppable tide. Quitting now would be an affront to all that you have endured, a betrayal of the strength that has carried you this far. Stand tall, embrace the darkness, and let it fuel your relentless pursuit of greatness.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the Daily Stoic.
Watching the wise. Take a good hard look at people's ruling principle, especially of the wise, what they run away from and what they seek out. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations 4.38. Seneca has said, without a ruler to do it against, you can't make crooked straight. That is the role of wise people in our lives, to serve as model and inspiration, to bounce our ideas off and test our presumptions. Who that person will be for you is up to you. Perhaps it's your father or your mother. Maybe it's a philosopher or a writer or a thinker. Perhaps WWJD, what would Jesus do, is the right model for you. But pick someone, watch what they do and what they don't do, and do your best to do the same.
And that was the Daily Stoic. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now Bishop Robert Barron.
I'm standing before you as a relatively free speaker of English. I can express all my feelings and thoughts with sufficient nuance. How did I get so free with English? Because early on, I was told just talk any way you want. Well, of course not. From the time I was a child, my speech was controlled and it was limited by the laws of English vocabulary and syntax and grammar. Again and again, I was corrected in my speech. The law of English got ever deeper inside of me so that it determined not just the way I think, but even the way I feel and react. I so internalized the laws of English that I became a free speaker of the language. The law is not the enemy of freedom, but the condition for the possibility of freedom. It's the law, in fact, that makes us free. So it goes on a biblical understanding of freedom. In the Bible, freedom means something like this: not self-determination, but rather the disciplining of desire, so as to make the achievement of the good first possible and then effortless. The more you walk...
And that was Bishop Robert Barron. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, "The world's conflict of today is the conflict of the individual against the state. The same conflict that has been fought throughout mankind's history. The names change, but the essence and the results remain the same, whether it is the individual against feudalism or against absolute monarchy or against communism or fascism or Nazism or socialism or the welfare state. Unquote. And that's Ayn Rand from Conservatism, an Obituary, from Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the 33 Strategies of War.
From the Histories by Herodotus. The letter set Cyrus thinking of the means by which he could most effectively persuade the Persians to revolt, and his deliberations led him to adopt the following plan, which he found best suited to his purpose. He wrote on a roll of parchment that Astyages had appointed him to command the Persian army. Then he summoned an assembly of the Persians, opened the roll in their presence, and read out what he had written. And now, he added, I have an order for you. Every man is to appear on parade with a billhook. The order was obeyed. All the men assembled with their billhooks, and Cyrus's next command was that before the day was out, they should clear a certain piece of rough land full of thorn bushes, about 18 or 20 furlongs square. This too was done, whereupon Cyrus issued the further order that they should present themselves again on the following day after having taken a bath. Meanwhile, Cyrus collected and slaughtered all of his father's goats, sheep, and oxen in preparation for entertaining the whole Persian army at a banquet, together with the best wine and bread he could procure. The next day the guests assembled and were told to sit down on the grass and enjoy themselves. After the meal, Cyrus asked them which they preferred, yesterday's work or today's amusement. And they replied that it was indeed a far cry from the previous day's misery to their present pleasures. This was the answer which Cyrus wanted. He seized upon it at once and proceeded to lay bare what he had in mind. Men of Persia, he said, listen to me. Obey my orders, and you will be able to enjoy 1,000 pleasures as good as this without ever turning your hands to menial labor. But if you disobey, yesterday's task will be the pattern of innumerable others you will be forced to perform. Take my advice and win your freedom. I am the man destined to undertake your liberation, and it is my belief that you are a match for the Medes in war as in everything else. It is the truth I tell you. Do not delay, but fling off the yoke of Astyages at once. The Persians had long resented their subjection to the Medes. At last they had found a leader and welcomed with enthusiasm the prospect of liberty.
And that was the 33 Strategies of War. Back in a minute. Thank you. If you're a Democrat, you should vote Republican because today's society increasingly divests itself of the negativity of the other or the foreign. The process of globalization accelerates the dissolution of borders and distinctions. Yet, the depletion of negativity should not be equated with the disappearance of violence, since along with the violence of negativity, there's a violence of positivity, which is wielded without enmity or domination. Violence isn't merely an excess of negativity. It can also be an excess of positivity. The accumulation of the positive, which manifests as overachievement, overproduction, overcommunication, hyperattention, and hyperactivity. The violence of positivity is possibly even more disastrous than that of negativity because it is neither visible nor evident, and it evades immunological defense because of its positivity. Infection, invasion, and infiltration, which are characteristic of the violence of negativity, now give way to infarction. Back in a minute. Thank you. So this is the Reich Corner. Let's see if we're good. It's up. So the Reich Corner, and this is a good idea. You should check out this account on Instagram, RB Reich. And the reason is this gives you good practice. If you want to practice defeating the left, the best place to do it is on social media, Facebook, Instagram, X, all of that. It's an excellent way because you can stop and think about it and ask yourself, what are they doing? Not just what are they saying, what are they doing? And then once you figure out what they're doing, then the solution becomes obvious. So we have Reich here. Donald Trump is a threat to your retirement. The MAGA plan. Raise the retirement age and cut Social Security. Retirees could lose up to $100,000 after 10 years of MAGA benefit cuts. Kamala Harris, how the heck can you claim to fight for seniors when you intend to cut Social Security and Medicare, which we all know is a lifeline for so many of our seniors? Now, what is it that he's trying to do here is put Republicans on the defensive. And once we know that, then we know the way to deal with that is to refuse to go on the defensive, but go on the offensive instead. One of the things that we can do, of course, is go back and say, why are you going to let that happen? Hey, Mr. Reich, you're an otherwise responsible lefty. Why are you going to let anybody cut seniors' taxes? And then the other thing is with Kamala Harris, you notice with that little statement, she doesn't say what she's going to do to save Social Security, does she? No, he doesn't either, because they don't have a plan. Or maybe their plan is to allow millions and millions of illegal immigrants into the country, pay them $20 an hour in the hopes that they're going to go ahead and pay Social Security taxes and hope for the best. Maybe that's their plan. I don't know. But anyway, so you go on offense. You can then also, with the idea of the MAGA plan, is say, but Donald Trump is also going to cut he's going to cut taxes, so seniors will actually do better under the MAGA plan than under Kamala Harris. Because there's no way Kamala Harris will ever cut taxes. So cutting taxes is always a good response. So keep that in mind. But again, to review, what is he doing? He's trying to put you on defensive, so you want to go on the offensive. Hey, Mr. Reich, why are you going to let this happen? Hey, Kamala Harris, why are you going to let this happen? Why haven't you done something before? You guys have been in power. Robert Reich was the Secretary of Labor in the Clinton administration. Why didn't you do something to save Social Security back in the Clinton administration? Kamala Harris has been in power for at least 3 years. Why haven't you done something in the past 3 years to save Social Security? Back in a minute. Thank you. Nobody likes Kamala Harris. Women don't like Kamala Harris. You know why? Because she can't accessorize. What was she thinking? Back in a minute. Thank you. So opposite Kamala Harris is Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is a very, very popular guy. Look at what happened today, where he was invited by the news media. So even the news media likes him. Even ABC News likes Donald Trump. They invited him to a particular event, but they didn't bother to invite Kamala Harris because, you see, she's not likable. She's not a very popular person. So Donald Trump is likable. He's liked by everybody, including the news media. Back in a minute. Thank you. And then again, at this Trump situation, again, he puts himself in a position that he shouldn't. He didn't obviously do any research on this to find out what this was going to be. This was obviously a gotcha game from the beginning. I don't even know what it's supposed to be. I guess he was supposed to meet with black journalists, and I don't know what was supposed to happen. Was he supposed to give a speech, or was he going to be interviewed? I don't know. But there was a lady from ABC that started off with the questioning. Now, this account, this X account by Benny Johnson. It says, President Trump goes off on reporter at NABJ, National Association of Black Journalists, I guess is what that stands for, interview after getting hostile with her first question, trying to claim Trump is a racist. And this is wrong. If you listen to it, you'll notice that she does not do that. She hints and suggests. She claims that he made certain statements about black women, that he made certain statements about black journalists, that he made certain statements about black district attorneys and attorneys general. But she never calls him flat out a racist. She lets people like Benny Johnson do that for her. Okay. Now, one of the things that Trump could do in this particular situation, it'd be harder for him, but if I'm faced with this situation, let's say at work, somebody comes in and makes all these kinds of allegations to me, one of the first things I'm going to ask them is, what race are you? Okay, you want to play the race card? We'll play the race game. What race are you? And then if I get some kind of a response like, well, what do you think I am? Or are you kidding? Or something like that, then I'm going to say, how about this? What race do you think I am? You got to put it right back on them. Because again, what they're trying to demonstrate here is race consciousness. They want Donald Trump to come out with things like, a lot of my friends are black, and I had black people in my administration, and on, which demonstrates is him proving to everybody that he's race conscious. Okay, and then if they can bait him into throwing out a couple of stereotypes, then the illusion is complete, and he ends up outing himself as a rather undesirable person, if not a racist. So you don't take the bait in the first place. You put it back on them. What race are you? Because I don't remember this lady, because I was listening to this clip, I don't remember the lady coming out and saying, hi, I'm a black woman. She didn't identify herself. And the way things work, according to the left, is people are as they identify themselves at any given time. So anybody can be any race they want to be. Anybody can be any sex they want to be. Okay? So that's why perfectly wide open question that I could ask. It would be a little bit harder for Donald Trump to do it, but it's a lot easier for me to do it, to say to one of my coworkers that's giving me this kind of gas, is say, what race are you anyways? And what race do you think I am? Oh, while you're thinking about it, maybe we'll talk about it again some other time. I got to go. Bye. We're done. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. But again, don't, when you hear all this hinting stuff, they're playing a game with you. They want you to come out and identify yourself as a racist. They want you to come out and say, oh, she's calling me a racist. She didn't say that. She didn't say any of that. Now, that's another thing he could do that would put her on the spot is, excuse me, are you calling me a racist? Just flat out, hit her right with it. Then the follow-up question would be, are you angry with me? Because you sound like you have an angry tone of voice. Are you angry with me? And then finally, do you hate me? Okay, again, one of the other things she's trying to do is be transparent. What is she doing? She's trying to be transparent. She's race baiting. And once you know what she's doing, pay attention to what she's doing, then the solutions become obvious. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, from Michael Knowles, Speechless, Controlling Words and Controlling Minds, Chapter 9.
Chapter 9, Campus Codes and Coercion. The university campus gave birth to political correctness, and with characteristic ingratitude, political correctness killed its alma mater. Colleges across the country nursed neo-Marxism, critical theory, deconstruction, postmodernism, and all the other radical analyses that would come to constitute what we know as political correctness. Universities gave these movements the means to transmit their radical ideas to an entire generation of elites who could import them into corporate boardrooms and the halls of government. But to put those ideas into practice, political correctness had to destroy the institution that gave it life. Political correctness is an anti-standard standard, a negative device designed to overthrow traditional mores and institutions. So paradoxically, political correctness must both preserve the university and destroy it in order to succeed. Only the university campus, one of the West's defining institutions, could provide the safe haven from reality necessary to nurture the ruthless criticism of all that exists. But the practice of those ideas dismantles that very institution. Long before trigger warnings and safe spaces, university campuses offered a respite from the dangers of the real world. But radicals needed a pretext for overhauling campus policy regarding speech and behavior, so they implausibly portrayed universities as perilous hotbeds of racism and rape. Violence did occasionally break out on campuses, particularly during the 1960s. But in those cases, the radicals themselves committed the assaults. In 1969, rifle-wielding student activists stormed and occupied Willard Straight Hall at Cornell University, evicting parents who had been visiting their children for the weekend. The students demanded the creation of an Africana Studies department. The armed occupiers justified the takeover as a response to reports of a burning cross the previous night outside of the Wari Black Women's Cooperative on campus. But the cross burning appears to have been a hoax. Ithaca police never tracked down the elusive cross burners, and they suspected Afro-American Society, AAS, members of setting the blaze themselves to justify further protests, a thesis that one AAS member later seems to have confirmed. Stephen Goodwin, a Cornell student who served as treasurer of the Afro-American Society, called the cross burning a setup. The society had contrived the hoax, according to Goodwin, to bring more media and more attention to the whole thing. Whatever really transpired that night, racial hate hoaxes of the sort Goodwin described would proliferate in the ensuing decades as student radicals, bereft of any real grievance, invented imaginary oppression. The actor Jussie Smollett turned in a poor performance in 2019 when he hired two Nigerian bodybuilders to don red Trump hats, punch him in the face, and gently lay a noose around his neck in the dead of night while shouting, "This is MAGA country," in the middle of Chicago, a city governed exclusively by Democrats since 1931. When the truth came out, everyone from President Trump to the left-wing comedian Dave Chappelle mocked Smollett. But similar hoaxes happen often, most notably on college campuses. In 2016, 3 black students accused Ohio bakery owner Alan Gibson of racially profiling Oberlin College students. Oberlin faculty, staff, and administrators organized protests. The university canceled its contracts with Gibson's Food Mart. In reality, Gibson had caught the students stealing liquor from the store, a crime the ringleader later admitted. Fortunately, the Oberlin story had a happy ending. An Ohio jury awarded the owners $44 million in punitive and compensatory damages in its defamation case against the college. On the very same day the Oberlin students slandered Alan Gibson as a bigot, Bowling Green State student Elisha Long fabricated an attack by rock-hurling white Trump supporters. Long struggled to keep her story straight, and cell phone records later revealed she wasn't even present at the site of the alleged attack. The only evidence of racism or violence investigators found was a trove of text messages that Long had sent to her boyfriend, disparaging whites and wishing death upon Trump supporters. "I hope they all get AIDS," she wrote. In 2017, a black student activist left a racist threat on her own car at St. Olaf College in Minnesota. That same year, 5 black Air Force Academy cadets wrote racial slurs on their own doors. The following November, Finn Arthur, a black student at Goucher College in Maryland, wrote, "I'm going to kill all niggers," in a dormitory bathroom. The list of similar incidents in recent years could fill not just its own chapter, but a full book. When police discovered the true source of the threatening graffiti, Arthur confessed to having scrawled the threat, as well as a backward swastika and dorm room numbers of black students, including himself. He blamed his bottled-up anger for motivating him to commit the crime. Whatever the source of his anger, it could not have been racial bigotry on campus, so lacking that he had to invent it. Stranger still, Arthur's mugshot reveals that he hardly even looks black. He may have black ancestors, but Arthur appears to be white, making even more preposterous the notion that skinheads might target him for attack. Lest one conclude that race plays the decisive factor in these hoaxes, the many false claims of rape that have bedeviled college campuses in recent years as well bear recounting. Left-wing activists have popularized the claim that 1 in 5 women will be raped during their undergraduate years. Some radicals inflate the statistic to 1 in 4. If those numbers were true, women would face greater danger on the picturesque green of Harvard Yard than they do in the back alleys of Botswana. No reasonable person could believe those statistics, least of all the purported victims, many of whom had not realized they had been raped until left-wing activists informed them of their victimhood. The origins of the 1 in 5 statistic lie in a 13-question survey designed by the social scientist Mary Koss for Kent State University students in 1976. The first 12 questions addressed various sexual acts with different degrees of ambiguity. The 13th asked bluntly, "Have you ever been raped?" According to Koss, many respondents got the last question wrong. Koss then revised and re-administered the survey to 6,000 university students across 32 campuses in the United States. She determined that 27% of respondents, more than 1 in 4, had suffered rape since the age of 14. But only 55% of those clinically classified victims agreed with Koss's assessment. A more recent survey by the Association of American Universities arrived at the 1 in 4 statistic through the explicit use of political correctness. The social scientists administering the survey simply redefined the terms. The surveyors found that 11% of female undergraduate respondents had suffered rape or sodomy according to the legal definitions of those terms, but that number soared to 23% when measured by the vaguer category of sexual assault, which might include any unwanted grabbing, groping, or rubbing against the other in a sexual way, even if the touching is over the other's clothes. But this broad definition robs the statistic of all meaning. One cannot compare an unwanted pinch, however unpleasant, immoral, and even illegal, to rape. Still, even discarding the dubious 1 in 4 statistic, the survey's finding that 11% of female undergraduates had suffered rape or sodomy still sounds implausibly high. A closer look at the data reveals why. Just half of those 11% of respondents reported that any force was involved in their encounter. The other half report being too drunk to give consent according to the law, a circumstance that raises a problem for the statisticians. Sexual encounters and drinking go hand in hand on campus. Drunken undergraduates often get frisky. Depending on the circumstances, the law or a social scientist with an agenda might classify an ostensibly consensual sexual encounter as rape, even if neither party involved agreed with that assessment. A crime might well have taken place. One party or even both might consider the encounter coercive, even absent physical force. The structure of the survey means one simply cannot know. Still, even counting none of the drunken encounters as rape, 5.5% is a staggering statistic. Is 1 of every 18 girls really raped during her time in college? Probably not, as even the AAU researchers admit. Fewer than 1 in 5 students asked to take the survey agreed to do so. Hundreds of thousands of students chose not to participate, which likely accounts for a non-response bias, as researchers find that students who have been assaulted are more likely to take the survey in the first place. These methodological issues and others explain the discrepancy between the 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 statistics and data gathered by the Justice Department over the past several decades, which show that female college students are significantly less likely to be raped or sexually assaulted than non-student women of the same age. The DOJ found a victimization rate of 7.6 among 1,000 non-students and 6.1 among 1,000 students. In both cases, the Justice Department data show victimization rates more than an order of magnitude lower than the ideological surveys suggest. Harvard is not more dangerous for women than Botswana. It isn't more dangerous for women than the surrounding neighborhoods of Boston. In fact, it is much safer, as everyone knows intuitively. Yet the popular fantasy of epidemic campus rape persists, encouraged by regular, high-profile hoaxes. In 2016, a female student at Austin Peay State University in Tennessee reported a sexual assault. She refused to provide a description of the suspect, changed her story, and later admitted she had fabricated the incident. That same year, an undergraduate woman at Clemson University in South Carolina falsely claimed to have been abducted and sexually assaulted. The next year, in 2017, a female undergraduate at the nearby College of Charleston accused her classmate of sexual assault after a night of drinking. A jury took just 28 minutes to acquit the young man when the case made it to trial. But by that point, the school had already labeled the accused man a rapist and thrown him out of school. Also in 2017, a 21-year-old Michigan student claimed to have been raped by a stranger while walking to her car. When police investigated, she refused a physical examination and changed virtually every detail of her account as the story began to unravel. At one point, she named a suspect who presented investigators with text messages in which the accuser had accused another man at a different location of committing the same rape. Police later charged her with filing a false report. In 2014, Rolling Stone magazine alleged in a lengthy article that members of the Phi Kappa Psi fraternity at the University of Virginia had gang raped an undergraduate identified only as Jackie during an initiation ritual. The thinly sourced story offered no evidence for its shocking claims beyond the yarn spinning of an anonymous accuser. Her fable fell apart, and Rolling Stone retracted the story in its entirety the following year, to the great surprise of gullible fools who imagine college campuses teeming with predators and rapists. Though college rape hoaxes have multiplied in recent years, the phenomenon goes back much further. In 2006, a stripper named Crystal Gail Mangum alleged that members of the Duke lacrosse team had raped her. Prosecutor Mike Nifong suppressed evidence, the case fell apart, and all charges were dropped the following year. Nifong was later disbarred, and Mangum ended up in prison after murdering her boyfriend. But justice came too late for the lacrosse players, whose education and reputations had been destroyed for a lie. Even the halcyon days of the early 1990s, before political correctness had run its poisonous course, saw their fair share of rape hoaxes at colleges, including George Washington University and Princeton, where the accuser Mindy Brickman eventually recanted her claims in the Daily Princetonian and admitted never even having met the man she falsely accused. One suspects some psychological issues deranged these hoaxers, but psychology cannot explain why these incidents seem to have become more frequent and elaborate in recent years, dominating the mainstream media and our national conversation, as ideologues euphemistically dub the cacophony. The relative safety and racial harmony enjoyed on college campuses ought to be a cause for celebration, particularly among self-styled social justice warriors. Why would students fabricate stories of violence at their most cherished institutions? The Reverend Jesse Jackson shouted the answer on January 15, 1987, as he led some 500 student activists in a march down Palm Drive on Stanford University's campus. Hey, hey, ho, ho, Western Civ has got to go, chanted the radicals. The marchers were referring specifically to Stanford's introductory humanities program, known as Western culture, but that narrow protest betrayed broader aims. Progressives have long had a parasitic, even parasital relationship with the university, which incubates their ideology, supplies them with sinecures, and furnishes the expertise and social scientific data necessary to their administrative state. But universities, more than any edifice, save perhaps cathedrals, symbolize the Western culture that the radicals seek to subvert. The revolutionaries cannot afford to burn campuses to the ground, as they often do churches. So instead, they empty universities of the traditional culture they represent and transmit. A year after Jackson's stunt, Stanford appointed a task force to decide whether or not to revamp the Western culture curriculum. Barry M. Katz, a Stanford historian and member of that committee, saw an irreconcilable conflict of visions. The existing course requirement asserts that we have a common culture, and it asserts that it can be defined by a bit of reading in the great works, he explained. This has been an affront to a large number of students and faculty, to women and members of minority groups. In reality, ideology more than race or sex united the politically correct reformers. But even taking the radicals at their word, how had Western civilization affronted racial minorities and women? Contrary to popular propaganda, not only did the West not invent racism and sexism, but it has uniquely eschewed both. Unlike closed and tribal cultures everywhere else on Earth, Western civilization has welcomed and integrated new peoples to enjoy and contribute to its superior cultural achievements. The very same year Stanford and other universities debated heaving-ho Western culture, the Nobel Prize-winning novelist Saul Bellow infamously challenged the politically correct curriculum reformers. "Who is the Tolstoy of the Zulus?" he asked them. "The Proust of the Papuans. I'd be happy to read them." The radicals wailed and gnashed their teeth, but none has refuted his point. The race-hustling writer Ta-Nehisi Coates quoted Bellow with indignation in his second autobiography, Between the World and Me. "Tolstoy was white, and so Tolstoy mattered, like everything else that was white mattered," wrote Coates. And this view of things was connected to the fear that passed through the generations, to the sense of dispossession. We were black, beyond the visible spectrum, beyond civilization. Our history was inferior because we were inferior, which is to say our bodies were inferior. But Tolstoy does not matter because he was white. He matters because he wrote War and Peace. He wrote Anna Karenina and countless other stories that plumb the depths of human nature and hold a mirror to mankind. Plenty of white people do not matter in the slightest to the advancement of knowledge. For example, the many frivolous whites who admire Coates's work. But Coates's radical materialism prevents him from recognizing the metaphysical character of Tolstoy's greatness. For Coates, only matter matters. But even as a matter of matter, the perpetually aggrieved Coates reveals at best his ignorance and at worst his cynically selective indignation. The Russian Tolstoy looms large in the Western tradition, but not nearly so large as the African St. Augustine. 3 Berbers ascended to the papacy within the first 5 centuries of the Church, which since the 5th century has venerated St. Moses the Black, among other non-white Christians. Later in Between the World and Me, Coates recalls the sports journalist Ralph Wiley's famous rejoinder to Bellow. "Tolstoy is the Tolstoy of the Zulus," admonishes Wiley, "unless you find a profit in fencing off universal properties of mankind into exclusive tribal ownership." Coates and Wiley are right that reading Tolstoy edifies readers regardless of their race. But Tolstoy was no Zulu, and the universal mind of mankind did not educate him. A specific culture, loosely Western, specifically Russian, produced Tolstoy. That same culture has generously opened its books, classrooms, and ports of entry to the rest of the world. Ta-Nehisi Coates' own career disproves his thesis. In 2015, Coates' prosaic whining won him the National Book Award and a MacArthur Genius Grant worth $500,000. Establishment elites cannot get enough of his grousing. Despite possessing a black body, the singularly oppressed flesh that Coates never ceases to lament, today the young author of 2 memoirs enjoys far greater acclaim than Bellow and, perhaps in some circles, even Tolstoy. The radicals at Stanford contended that Western culture affronts women and minorities. In fact, no civilization in history has shown women and minorities greater respect. But radicals exploited that singular deference to undermine the civilization itself. They pressured the university to drop the course, arguing with a straight face against the Eurocentricity of European culture. Stanford caved. In 1988, the administration abandoned Western culture for Civilization, Ideas, and Values, or CIV. Bureaucrats never can resist an acronym. The old Western culture curriculum, among the most popular and successful courses in the university's century-long history, included 15 required books, 18 strongly recommended texts, and other works of literature and philosophy broadly considered monuments of Western thought. The new CIV course traded some of those great books for emerging scholarship in gender, race, and ethnic studies. In other words, Stanford embraced the school of resentment. These academic debates over history, literature, and language reverberated far beyond the campus walls. Education Secretary William Bennett deplored the curriculum change as a proposal to drop the West. In 1987, the same year Jackson led his march against Western Civ, the philosopher Alan Bloom published The Closing of the American Mind, an unexpected bestseller that tracked the decay of the modern university. Bloom subtitled his book, How higher education has failed democracy and impoverished the souls of today's students. Despite the dry subject and ponderous subtitle, the book sold over 1 million copies. The public understood that something in the nation's psyche had snapped. Bloom saw in the new campus culture the central paradox of political correctness. The pursuit of openness had closed people's minds. Openness, and the relativism that makes it the only plausible stance in the face of various claims to truth and various ways of life and kinds of human beings, is the great insight of our times. The true believer is the real danger, Bloom wrote. Whereas in the past, American education had aimed at excellence, scholarship, and the cultivation of the knowledge and virtues necessary to liberty, that is, the liberal arts, by the mid to late 20th century, it valued openness above all else. Alan Bloom understood the radicals to believe that the study of history and of culture teaches that all the world was mad in the past. Men always thought they were right, and that led to wars, persecution, slavery, xenophobia, racism, and chauvinism. We must therefore liberate ourselves, not only from false opinion, but from opinion itself. As Bloom saw it, the reformer's point is not to correct the mistakes and really be right. Rather, it is not to think you are right at all. The American mind had become so open that its brain had fallen out. A handful of conservative intellectuals such as Bloom and Bennett put up a fight, but most right-wingers rolled over, if they paid attention to the academic controversy at all. Conservatives continued to write the same checks to send their children to the same schools, despite the collapse in educational quality. So the students lost a few weeks of Socrates to read Shulamith Firestone. Not ideal, the parents shrugged, but nothing to lose sleep over. The new culture of openness may waste students' time, they reasoned. But when devising curricula, one would rather be too open than too closed. Once again, conservatives fell for the trap. The radicals did indeed want to open the curriculum, but only to close it again on terms more favorable to their political ends. Just as with free speech and tolerance, perfect openness cannot exist. Boundaries must constrain free speech, if only to protect speech, as in the case of laws against sedition or rules against the heckler's veto. Tolerance cannot tolerate intolerance, and openness cannot leave itself open to closed-mindedness. In Bloom's words, the education of openness is open to all kinds of men, all kinds of lifestyles, all ideologies. There is no enemy other than the man who is not open to everything. But no man really can be open to everything, least of all the reformers. Education requires judgment, and popularity contests do not determine truth. Pedagogy is neither an open nor a democratic process. When one decides that 2 + 2 = 4, he closes off his mind from the possibility that 2 + 2 might equal 5. One may read the King James Bible and agree, "O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is thy name in all the earth." Or one may read Hamlet's rewriting of that psalm and agree that the earth and sky appear no other thing than a foul and pestilent congregation of vapors. Each vision precludes the other. Even Hamlet's assertion, when feigning madness, that his reading amounted to no more than words, 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 a forerunner of the genuinely mad, politically correct radicals' relativism, constitutes a judgment. Radical openness collapses into the claim that no meaning exists at all, and therefore it excludes the possibility that any meaning does exist. When there are no shared goals or vision of the public good, is the social contract any longer possible? Bloom asked. But the radicals do share a goal, the ruthless criticism of all that exists. They lack a vision of the public good, but they have a clear sense of the public evil. Oppressive tradition impedes progress, so to open itself to the future, society must close itself off from its past. Political correctness advances by redefinition. Americans cherish free speech, tolerance, open minds, and liberty. Rather than turn people against those values, the radicals turned the concepts inside out. They launched a free speech movement to overturn traditional standards by appealing to the nation's reverence for free speech, after which they inaugurated a new era of censorship to enforce their new standards. They preached tolerance until their ideas had entered the public discourse, at which point they demanded repression for their ideological foes. They demanded educators open curricula to new, resentful theories of race, sex, and citizenship, at which point they closed the American mind to its own culture. All of these perversions and inversions took place at the university, our secular culture's intellectual and spiritual center. So it comes as no surprise that the university's mission also came to be redefined. Liberal education long predates modern liberalism and even classical liberalism. It traces its roots back to ancient Greece, where it cultivated in citizens the habits, knowledge, and skills that befit free men. In medieval Europe, university students studied grammar, rhetoric, logic, geometry, arithmetic, music, and astronomy. These 7 subjects did not train pupils for any particular jobs. The liberal arts served a loftier goal. The liberal arts trained men to be free. The Marxist concept of false consciousness, popularized by the second-wave feminists of the 1970s, may have proven perverse in practice, but it began with a true principle. Men must be forced to be free. We come into this world helpless slaves to our appetites. If we persist in thoughtless pursuit of our lusts and desires, we descend into licentiousness. If we educate ourselves and tame our appetites through training in virtue, we attain liberty. A free politics requires free people. But free people reject the radicals' politics, so the radicals redefined liberal education. The reformers began by conflating licentiousness, the permission to do as one pleases, with liberty, which is the right to do what one ought. Today, few appreciate the difference between these polar opposites, but the men who built our country considered the distinction essential to self-government. The Rhode Island Charter of 1663 proclaimed that residents might freely and fully have and enjoy his and their own judgments and conscience in matters of religious concernments, they behaving themselves peaceably and quietly and not using this liberty to licentiousness and profaneness. The New York Constitution of 1777 insisted, "Liberty of conscience hereby granted shall not be so construed as to excuse acts of licentiousness." Licentiousness threatens liberty, which explains why the Founding Fathers spoke with such force on the need to suppress vice and encourage virtue. Virtue or morality is a necessary spring of popular government, declared George Washington in his farewell address. Benjamin Franklin observed, "Only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become more corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters." Thomas Jefferson, our nation's 3rd president, and, more important in his eyes, the founder of the University of Virginia, warned, "Without virtue, happiness cannot be. This, then, is the scope of all academical emulation." Jefferson took education seriously. Unfortunately, the Academy forgot his wise admonition, and by the latter half of the 20th century, the radicals had succeeded at replacing standards of virtue with a culture of licentiousness masquerading as liberty in the name of openness. But the university did not remain open for long. The inclusion of critical race theory on reading lists soon led to mandatory diversity trainings for faculty, staff, and students. The relaxation of social and sexual mores gave rise to campus tribunals that empowered professors and deans to scrutinize students' most intimate encounters and convict them of crimes as grave as rape without due process. The collapse of standards in language and composition led quickly to new speech codes along the radicals' ideological lines. Recent years have shown how quickly openness can transform into repression. In 2017, an applicant to Stanford composed his personal statement by writing the phrase, #Black Lives Matter 100 times. In saner eras, such repetitious exercises were reserved for dunces to chalk on the blackboard after school. By the 21st century, they gained students admittance into prestigious universities. But just a few years later, Kansas State University attempted to expel a student for making a joke on Twitter that contradicted the politically correct narrative about George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, though ultimately the law prohibited the university from expelling the student for his tweet. No sooner had the radicals abolished traditional standards of speech and behavior than they began to demand new codes to replace them. In 1988, the University of Michigan adopted a new policy on speech that prohibited any behavior, verbal or physical, that stigmatizes or victimizes an individual on the basis of race, ethnicity, religion, sex, sexual orientation, creed, and that creates an intimidating, hostile, or demeaning environment for educational pursuits, employment, or participation in university-sponsored extracurricular activities. The broad new code appeared to run afoul of the First Amendment, but inaction posed legal risks for the university as well. The previous year, a flyer had appeared on campus declaring open season on black students, whom it referred to as saucer lips, porch monkeys, and jigaboos. Investigators never determined who distributed the offensive flyers. Bigots may well have orchestrated the stunt, though the prevalence of racial hoaxes on campus forces one to consider the possibility that anti-racist activists themselves perpetrated the offense. Regardless, the student-led United Coalition Against Racism threatened the university with a class-action civil rights suit for not maintaining or creating a non-racist, non-violent atmosphere on campus. The administration acquiesced to the students' demands. A federal district court ultimately overturned the speech code on the grounds that the terms of the policy were so vague that its enforcement would violate the Due Process Clause. Students had not referred to any objective standard or established tradition to determine whether or not the speech they wanted to forbid stigmatized or victimized anyone on the basis of race, ethnicity, religion, sex, sexual orientation, or creed. If a Muslim student quotes the Quran, which asks, "What of all creation will you go to fornicate with the males, leaving aside those whom Allah has created for you as your mates? Nay, you are a people that has transgressed all limits," and instructs, "Punish both of those among you who are guilty of sodomy." Does he thereby victimize or stigmatize homosexuals on the basis of their sexual orientation? If the Muslim student faces criticism or punishment for quoting the Quran, has he been victimized or stigmatized on the basis of his religion? The University of Michigan Speech Code overstepped the bounds set by the Constitution and the American legal tradition. But it does not therefore follow that the Constitution prohibits all limits on speech. In 1942, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously to uphold a New Hampshire law that prohibited any offensive, derisive, or annoying word to anyone who is lawfully in the street or public space, or to call him by an offensive or derisive name. Justice Frank Murphy, writing for the court, explained, "There are certain well-defined and narrowly limited classes of speech, the prevention and punishment of which have never been thought to raise any constitutional problem." Justice Murphy cited lewd, obscene, and libelous language as well as fighting words as examples of speech outside the purview and protection of the First Amendment. As we have already discussed, limitations on certain types of speech can be traced back to the earliest days of our republic. Some of those unprotected categories appear broad and vague, such as New Hampshire's ban on annoying address, or the nation's long-standing suppression of obscenity, which evades precise definition, though we all know it when we see it, to borrow Justice Potter's famous phrase. Conservatives and libertarians overstate their case when they argue that all limitations on speech are unconstitutional. But worse, they misunderstand political reality and fall into the same utopian idealism of which they accuse their left-wing opponents. Nature abhors a vacuum, and no society will long tolerate the total absence of standards. Unless conservatives summon the courage to enforce our own standards of speech, vague encomia to free speech will accomplish nothing more than to delay the inevitable establishment of the radicals' politically correct standards. The University of Michigan proved this point when, decades after the district court struck down their speech code, the school established a new bias response team to serve the same function. Administrators tasked the team with investigating campus incidents that could give offense on the basis of race, sex, sexual preference, or religion. Speech First, a free speech advocacy group, sued the school on First Amendment grounds. A U.S. District Court ruled in favor of the university, but the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals later reversed this ruling and found that the bias response team acts by way of implicit threat of punishment and intimidation to quell speech. The school disbanded the team and settled with Speech First. But no sooner had university administrators retired the team than they established a new campus climate support team to support students, faculty, or staff who claim to have been offended. Once again, the defense of free speech in the abstract, rather than through the practical tradition of free speech circumscribed by standards, seems only to have delayed the politically correct radicals' victory. The Michigan Speech Code and the New Hampshire Offensive Conduct Law that the Supreme Court upheld in 1942 Both outlawed broad swaths of speech. But the New Hampshire law was not vague. It followed long and widely held standards. The Michigan Speech Code was vague because it attempted to establish a new standard on politically correct lines. The issue could not be settled by the frivolous debate over whether one may have standards at all. It came down instead to the substantive question of what the standards said. Sex offers the clearest view of how the debate over standards has proceeded on campus. Until the mid-20th century, universities enforced strict guidelines regulating how the sexes socialized on campus. Co-education barely existed at American universities before the 1960s, and where it did, administrators took pains to make sure the co-eds remained focused on their studies rather than more titillating activities. Of her freshman year in 1969, Harvard graduate Carol Sternhell recalls, "My memory was that boys were only allowed up in the rooms on Sundays, with the door open and 3 feet on the floor at all times. But the social rules extended far beyond the dorm room. We had curfews. We had to sign out in the evenings. If we got in late, we were in big trouble. Men still had to wear jackets and ties to dinner in the freshman union." By Sternhell's sophomore year, women were living unofficially with their boyfriends. By junior year, whole dorms had gone co-ed. Her classmate Helen Snively observes, "Virginity and parietals were all falling apart, and no sweet dean from Fay House was going to prevent it." If the Cultural Revolution seemed sudden from the vantage of history, it felt all the more so to the students living through it. A change of values and morality, of politics, of possibilities, and of our most fundamental beliefs about ourselves, reflects Sternhell, overnight. The age of Aquarius had dawned, but its promise of free love and nonconformity would soon collapse into a new set of rules just as rigid as the standards it replaced. In 1991, Antioch College in Ohio issued a new sexual assault prevention policy at the behest of Women, WOMYN, of Antioch, a student activist group whose ideological leanings one need not explain. The school required verbal consent from both parties. The bourgeois university assumed only 2 participants in any such encounter. Each and every time there is sexual activity, at each new level of sexual activity, with judgment perfectly unimpaired by alcohol, drugs, or mental health conditions, among other intoxicants, paired with the use of safer sex practices, regardless of the type of sexual activity that occurs, the props, /toys, /tools that are used, the number of persons involved, the genders or gender expressions of persons involved. Ideologues in the Antioch administration had achieved the impossible. They had made sex boring. Worse, they had made sex dangerous by issuing guidelines that were virtually impossible to satisfy. Nothing kills the mood quite like requesting and providing explicit clinical consent at each new level of sexual activity, whatever that means. Moreover, undergraduate liaisons involve impaired judgment almost by definition. If wanton young women had sound judgment, they would demand a ring. Antioch had defined practically all sexual activity as rape. Students had only to rely on the caprices of university administrators and undergraduate lovers, who can label them rapists at a whim. The animated sitcom South Park satirized such policies in 2015 when it depicted PC Principal walking down the hallway of his politically correct fraternity, collecting sexual consent forms from the brothers. "Rise and shine, guys," yells PC Principal. "If you scored last night, I'll need your consent forms." When he notices that one of his charges performed a particularly lurid sexual act, he corrects him. "Whoa, Barker. There's a different release form, bro." Antioch College shuttered its doors in 2008, but a similarly draconian consent code lives on at Gettysburg College, which requires continuing and active verbal consent for all sexual activity, from patting and hugging to more invasive interactions. Countless other colleges have adopted comparable policies. These sexual guidelines bear mentioning not because students have some right to sexual pleasure that colleges have violated. Students have no such right, and conservatives would not likely take umbrage at the violation even if they did. Rather, the policies merit reflection because they show the necessity and inevitability of standards. The sheer breadth of Antioch's sex code might have scandalized the most prudish prig in Victorian England. The fantasy of higher education as an anarchic orgy in which freewheeling intellectuals and liberated students attain knowledge by doing as they please ignores the university's millennium-long history as an ordered institution dedicated to the pursuit of truth by the light of particular premises. Worse yet, it ignores the present reality of the university, which has methodically replaced every old rule it deconstructed with the new rigidities of political correctness. During the latter half of the 20th century, radical ideologues took over the universities, sometimes by force. They dismantled the norms and traditions that had fostered Western education with a campaign of withering criticism and wholly critical studies that weakened the moral resolve of educators, the very people who ought to have known better, and transformed the university into a free-for-all. The radicals then turned their critical eye on the university itself, which they portrayed as a hotbed of racial bigotry and rape. This dishonest depiction gave the radicals pretext to complete their takeover by installing rigid new rules more favorable to their political agenda. Meanwhile, gullible conservatives adopted the radicals' shallow, tactical, and temporary laissez-faire rhetoric as their raison d'etre, abandoning the moral clarity and confidence necessary to oppose the new standard of political correctness. By the time the Berlin Wall crumbled at the turn of the 1990s and a new cultural Cold War burst out into the open, the politically correct belligerents had accumulated every advantage.
And that was Chapter 9, Campus Codes, by Michael Knowles from his book Speechless, Controlling Words and Controlling Minds. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Chapter 16 of the book Management of the Absurd. Individuals are almost indestructible, but organizations are very fragile. I've been impressed again and again by how resilient individuals are, but how fragile are the organizations that are key to their survival. Even the most intense, confrontational, and sometimes traumatic situations rarely damage an individual. Yes, there is hurt, but seldom is there permanent damage. People survive the most devastating natural disasters in relatively good psychological shape. But relationships can be destroyed with one wrong word, one single act. That has important implications for organizations, particularly small ones. Most businesses fail because of ruptured relationships among the principals. Commonly held ideas about the fragility of individuals have led us to treat people who have gone through horrifying experiences such as the Holocaust as if they were damaged goods. So we compound their hurt by regarding them as somehow less than fully capable. That is not to say people don't suffer, but they are not damaged to a point where they function less than normally. A former student of mine, Edith Eggers, a survivor of Auschwitz, discovered this when she conducted a study of other Holocaust survivors. While they were no doubt deeply scarred on all life adjustment and personality measures, they functioned as well as, or better than, others who had not experienced such traumatic ordeals. Fragile monoliths. Individuals are very strong, but organizations are not. Part of the reason why we don't recognize the vulnerability of organizations is that we have a hard time believing that the relationships which make them work are real. Even psychologists sometimes think of organizations as simply collections of individuals. But relationships, the bonds between people, are very real, and they have a life of their own. To a great extent, they determine the behavior of an organization and the people within it. We may also feel that we can abuse organizations because we have all had experiences with bureaucracies that make them seem like monoliths, impenetrable to all our efforts to make them to respond. We feel we have no impact on organizations, that no matter what we do, they can absorb it. That, of course, is not the case. One bad press story can severely damage a bureaucracy. Even giant corporations that seem indestructible can be seriously wounded or even brought down by a single unfortunate turn of events, as we have recently seen with the bankruptcy of Dow Corning as a result of lawsuits filed on behalf of the recipients of the company's silicone breast implants, and with the closure of Johns Manville because of litigation over the health hazards of asbestos. Not all companies deserve to survive, but nevertheless, we should be paying more attention as a society to sustaining organizations. We cannot assume that because they are large, they are also invincible. A troubled or failing organization needs at least as much attention as a troubled or failing individual. After all, our lives depend upon organizations. For all practical purposes, in terms of our ability to understand and improve the way society functions, it may be that the individual is the wrong focus of our attention. Perhaps we should be looking more carefully at constellations of individuals, groups, families, work teams. My experience tells me that people suffer most in their lives from failed or failing relationships, parental rejections, marital strife, difficulties with bosses, or from the lack of relationships, isolation, alienation, erosion of community. It follows then that the best way to deal with individuals may be to improve relationships. And that was the end of chapter 16. Individuals are almost indestructible, but organizations are very fragile, from the book, The Management of the Absurd. And next week is chapter 17. The better things are, the worse they feel. Back in a minute. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.